Who is the most stressed person in the world? Someone trying to make it to the end of the month? Or someone managing millions of dollars? Here's the interesting thing. The answer isn't as simple as it seems, because most people believe money eliminates stress. More money, less anxiety, a more comfortable life. At least that's how it sounds in theory. But real life doesn't always work that way, because money solves certain problems. But at the same time, it creates new ones. And depending on where you are in life, the thing keeping you awake at night can be completely different. At one point, you're trying to make money. At another point, you're trying to protect it. Then you're trying to sustain it. And sometimes, you start questioning what you were working so hard for in the first place. Maybe that's the part people talk about the least, the hidden side of money. Because people usually show you their success, but very few show you the weight that comes with it. And maybe financial stress never truly disappears. Maybe it simply changes shape. Level 1 Survival Stress. You're 24 years old. It's a typical Monday morning. Your alarm goes off. You unplug your phone and pick it up. You check the notifications that came in overnight, messages, emails. Everything looks normal. Then you get out of bed. You head to work. You attend the meetings you always attend. You grab your coffee and take a sip. The workday ends. You go back home. So far, everything seems normal. From the outside, it looks like a completely ordinary life. In fact, a lot of people would probably like to be in your position, because you have a job, you earn a steady income, your life has a certain structure. But there's another side of your life that most people never see. Because sometimes stress doesn't come from the things you don't have, it comes from the things you could lose. And that's exactly what many people at this level feel. One day, while everything seems to be going fine, a small thought appears in your mind. What if things change? What if things start getting worse? What if the company downsizes? What if something unexpected happens? What if a global crisis appears? What if this entire routine falls apart? Here's the strange thing. Most of those fears haven't happened. But the human mind can react as if they already have. That's why some people can't fully relax, even during a quiet dinner. Even while watching a movie, part of their mind keeps running. Even during a walk, they're calculating the future. Because survival stress isn't really about a lack of money. It's about a lack of security. It's about never feeling completely safe. And the younger you are, the stronger that feeling can sometimes be. Because you still don't know exactly how life will unfold. You haven't made enough mistakes yet. You haven't been through enough storms yet. So even a small uncertainty can feel much bigger than it really is. Maybe that's why some people still can't relax even after their income increases. Because the problem isn't always the numbers. It's what those numbers make you feel. People often think they'll finally feel secure once they earn more money, but most of the time, something else happens. Because the feeling of security is far more complicated than a bank account. At some point, you stop thinking about the money in your account and start thinking about the stability you could lose. Without realizing it, you spend a large part of your life calculating possibilities, scenarios that haven't happened, problems that don't exist yet, crises that may never come. But your mind can process them as if they're real. And sometimes the exhausting part isn't life itself. It's living in a constant state of alertness. Maybe that's why some people don't find peace when they first start making money. They simply meet a new kind of fear. Because at this level, the biggest fear isn't failure, it's falling. And at the next level, things become even more interesting. Because now you're no longer afraid of falling. You may be afraid of being on the wrong path. Level 2 Uncertainty Stress. After a while, something interesting happens. Your life hasn't fallen apart. In fact, many things are going well. You have a stable job. You have a steady income. You wake up, go to work, and come back home. You may have even achieved some of the things you dreamed about years ago. And yet, there's a feeling you can't quite explain. Something keeps bothering you. Because now, you're no longer afraid of falling. You're afraid of not knowing where you're going. This type of stress is invisible. And that's what makes it so dangerous. Nobody notices it from the outside. Because from the outside, everything looks fine. Maybe you live in a nice home in a nice neighborhood. Maybe you have a stable career. Maybe you have a great group of friends. Maybe people see you as successful. But inside your head, a completely different conversation is happening. Am I in the right place? Am I doing the right job? Should I stay here? Or should I try something else? Where will I be 5 years from now? Most people think financial stress is about not having enough money. But sometimes, as money increases, a different problem appears. Options, because when your options increase, your decisions increase. And when your decisions increase, so does the possibility of making the wrong choice. The human mind works in a strange way. Sometimes you're calmer when there's only one road in front of you. But when there are 10 different roads, you can exhaust yourself trying to figure out which one is right. Maybe that's why some people become less peaceful as their careers improve. They become more uncertain. Because now they're not just risking money, they're risking time. One day you're leaving work, you get into your car, or maybe onto a train, you stare out the window on the way home, and a strange thought enters your mind. What if I'm living the wrong life? Thoughts like that often appear out of nowhere. At first, it sounds ridiculous, but many people experience it at some point in their lives. Because uncertainty doesn't always come from bad circumstances. Sometimes it grows inside good ones. At a certain point, people stop wanting more money. They want more clarity. They want a future that doesn't constantly make them anxious. They want to know what they truly want. They want to feel like they're making the right decisions. But life rarely gives that guarantee. That's why some people struggle to sleep at night. The problem isn't bills. It isn't groceries. It isn't basic financial survival anymore. The problem is the future, years that haven't happened yet, decisions that haven't been made yet, possibilities that haven't become reality yet. And sometimes the mind becomes so focused on solving tomorrow that it completely misses today. While sitting in a cafe, while talking to a friend, even while on vacation, part of your mind can be somewhere else. Because you're constantly thinking about the next step. Maybe that's the biggest problem people face at this level. Instead of living their lives, they start analyzing them. And the more they analyze, the more questions appear. The more questions appear, the more anxiety follows. Then one day, you realize something. The exhausting part isn't making decisions. It's not knowing where those decisions will lead, because uncertainty is heavier than most people think. People can sometimes adapt to bad news, but adapting to the unknown is much harder. Maybe that's why some people think more as they get closer to success, because there are more roads in front of them, and every road leads to a different future. At this level, the biggest fear isn't failure. It may be choosing the wrong life. But at the next level, things change once again. Because now it isn't about what you want anymore. It's about the people who depend on you. Level 3: Responsibility Stress. At some point, life changes again. But this time, it isn't money that changes. It's responsibility. People often believe they'll feel more free once they earn more money. And to some extent, that's true. You gain more freedom, more options, more flexibility. But life doesn't always work the way people expect. Because as money grows, responsibility tends to grow with it. And one day, you realize something. You're no longer living only for yourself. Maybe you have a family, maybe a spouse. Or maybe there are simply people whose lives are affected by the decisions you make. This is where responsibility stress begins. And at this level, your fears start to change. You're no longer afraid of falling. You're afraid of letting people down. Because during the first 2 levels, most of the weight was yours to carry alone. If you made a mistake, you dealt with the consequences yourself. But now things are different, because other people depend on your decisions. And that's a much heavier feeling than most people realize. People usually see success, but they rarely see responsibility. They can see the better lifestyle, the nicer home, the stable career, but they can't see what keeps you awake at night. Because some burdens are silent, and the heaviest burdens are often invisible. Here's the strange part. At this level, many people are no longer working just to make money. They're working to maintain what they've built, to protect it, to sustain it. Because now it's not just about today, it's about next year, the years after that, the future of the people around you. At some point, your mind starts running calculations almost automatically. What if things go wrong? What if something unexpected happens? What if nothing goes according to plan? Unlike the previous levels, the stress here is driven almost entirely by responsibility. Most of these scenarios may never happen, but your mind doesn't know that. And sometimes the exhausting part isn't the problem itself, it's the possibility of the problem. Maybe that's one of the least talked about aspects of money. More money doesn't always mean less stress. Sometimes it creates new forms of stress, new expectations, new obligations. And over time, you begin to realize something. The heaviest thing in life isn't always work. It's carrying things, carrying expectations, carrying responsibility, carrying the future. Maybe that's why people at this level aren't necessarily looking for more money. They're looking for relief, a chance to breathe a little easier. Because at the center of responsibility stress isn't money, it's weight. A weight that lives inside your mind. And if you have a family, that weight can feel 10 times heavier. But here's the interesting part. Even this isn't the final stage. Because eventually, the question changes once again. It stops being, how do I get more? And becomes, what will actually remain when all of this is over? Level 4 Legacy Stress. At some point, life changes again. But this time, it isn't money that changes. It isn't responsibility either. It's your perspective. Most people spend the majority of their lives looking forward. More income, more security, more freedom. The next goal, the next milestone, the next chapter. But one day, something interesting happens. For the first time, you begin looking backward. And that's where legacy stress begins. This level feels different from all the others. It's quieter, less visible, but in many ways it's heavier. Because the question changes once again. What will actually remain when all of this is over? At some point you realize that life isn't only made up of the things you've gained. It's also made up of the things you'll leave behind. Maybe the thought comes during a walk. Maybe while sitting alone at home. Maybe at the end of a long day when everything finally becomes quiet. And suddenly a different set of questions appears. What was truly important? What was all of this for? Did I spend my time on the right things? Most people believe that more money will eventually make them happier. But for many people, there comes a point when money is no longer what they're searching for. They're searching for meaning. They want to know that what they're building matters. They want to know that their time meant something. They want to know that their life had a purpose beyond simply earning more. And that's what makes this level so difficult. Because there are no clear answers. Nobody can tell you what a meaningful life looks like. Nobody can tell you what will matter most to you 20 years from now. Those answers have to be found individually. And maybe that's why so many people who seem successful from the outside still wrestle with the same question. Am I living the life I truly wanted? Because eventually, people discover something that money can never fully solve. Money can create comfort. It can reduce uncertainty. It can ease certain burdens. But it can't create meaning. And maybe that's the final form of financial stress. Not worrying about money itself, but asking questions that money cannot answer. Because every stage of life comes with a different fear. Survival stress makes you search for security. Uncertainty stress makes you search for direction. Responsibility stress makes you search for strength. But legacy stress makes you search for meaning. And in the end, no matter how much money someone earns, most people eventually find themselves facing the same question. When everything is said and done, what was truly important?